Okay. Alright, finally, you can probably also hear me now. That's a good start. So, here's the promised and delayed analysis of your Blue Wolves Red Clear, which is going to be fundamental to any next thing we discuss in sessions and stuff. It's just one of these prerequisites that I want to get as clean as possible, as early as possible. So let's just look at yours first, and we'll have mine as reference when we need it. Okay, so, alright, that's a little sloppy. Alright, right. So, immediately we're half a second in, and I got like a few comments already. It's gonna be wonderful. So, first of all, when you are playing at start, you got your auto attack up. I'll call that an ability, like for just easy understanding. You have a couple of abilities, right? You have your Flash, Smite, Auto Attack, and either QW or E at your disposal. So, until you use one of them, you essentially have QW or E. You have all of them available, and if you use one of them, you're stuck with that for the rest of the game. So, at the start, usually we want to start E. That's just trial and error if you want to do it. It's just a certain amount of attack speed that you get and a certain amount of bonus damage you get. If you start at Q, you just trade it off, and easiest way of doing that is just by trying it out. Anyway, so, yeah, we start E, and we're not going to use Flash. Flash would be cheating. We're going to say Flash, not allowed to use that. Okay, so let's just say we got E and Auto Attack, and we got those up. Now, you have to understand that when you use an Auto Attack, and then you use it again, and then you use it again, there's two properties that you care about. Let's say you had your ult as well, right? And you use it, and then a lot of time passes, and then you use it again. Then some more time passes, etc. You know the drill. Okay, so let's analyze what happens with all of these abilities over time. Right. So, first of all, auto attack. The damage here, right, which is essentially the burst damage or upfront damage. The burst is like pretty bad, it's pretty low. But if you look at the damage over time, right, or the DPS over time, it's extremely high. So auto attacks score very, very well in that regard. And that's a very important property that I'll talk about in a second, which affects your decision making for the clears. So next, let's look at the E. Your E gives you a lot of utility, a lot of upfront. So now burst essentially has to be replaced with the word upfront utility. And that's a little bit of damage, like 50 magic damage, I think, rank 1, flat, like not accounting for resistances, and a whole lot of utility, right? And if you had R, the burst would be very, very high, and the damage over time would be very, very low. So if you calculate, if I just use the term DPS, obviously after 1 second, you have a lot of DPS, right? Or one combo, you can still get your R in to increase the DPS. It's if you take into account the damage over multiple uses that you get the damage over time that I'm referring to here. And in that regard, the R scores terribly. Absolutely terribly. Alright, so what does that tell us? That tells us that the damage over time essentially tells us how important it is to get an ability on cooldown. The lower this importance is, let me use a different color. So for this one, for the R, your focus is when to use it in a fight. Just find an ideal time, essentially. Right? And just use it once. And it's always going to happen once. Now with some abilities, it might be like once or twice, right? And then you have to create a trade-off between just using it early on to get it again, or to use it for an ideal time once, right? So that's a trade-off. In the case of auto attacks, you're certain you're gonna use it over and over and over again. So there's no trade-off like, do you need to look for an ideal time? No, you absolutely just want to go for the second point, which is efficiency, right? That is obviously the alternative of just selecting a really good time for something. So, what that means is that your auto attack needs to get used up immediately so that it can recharge while you use your E. because the auto attack has a way higher damage. This amount of time you spend recharging it has a way higher value than the little bit of flat recharge time on the E, right? If you could get both abilities up again, I'd want my E up, but in terms of the percentage of the cooldown, the E is really low, and if you look at just getting one more cooldown, it doesn't add up if you multiply that, right? You know what I'm talking about. So let me put it more simply. That 1 second of your auto attack cooldown is way more valuable than 1 second of your E cooldown, right? And whether you use Formulator to understand this, it's pretty obvious if you think about it, right? So this is getting a little bit hairy, and because the game is hairy, if you want to have a world record clear, you're gonna have some hairy concepts to work around. But it's gonna become very clear once you start understanding a couple of different concepts and how they work together. They're gonna connect, and it makes it not feel like you're playing a game of mathematics. Alright, so on to the next concept. This is... We're kind of doing two things with the clear. You got... In this game mode, the only option is to optimize for time, right? So now you cleared at 150, but you look at where you are and when you start wolves. So 150, 155, right? So at 150, you clear it, and 155, you go to the wolves. Now, what if I told you, let's now look at my reference and compare. So look at this. What I do, auto, auto, and I move. Auto, auto, and I move. Auto, auto, and I move. Auto, E, auto, and I move. Auto, auto, and I move again. One more auto, and here I could have kited it a little bit, so I didn't do that. But, you know, you see what happens here is I clear it at 148 or 147. And at 149, I'm already on the wolf. So you can see the difference, right? 148. And at 149, I'm already on the wolves. And I got my E up, right? So I initiate with auto plus Q. And then auto E, or I don't know if I had that cooldown up, but you get the point, right? So I had my E up. Just walked out there and started putting my auto attack on cooldown before using my E again. And that is a little bit conditional because of if I am over here, I'm only going to have about half of my E distance, so I feel like it's better to just attack the thing closest to me, which is the mini-wolf. Again, that is an evaluation, because you just don't know. You can't say, you can't, somewhere if you add attack speed to the E, this is going to become invalid, or if you add damage to your auto attacks or subtract it. So it's just an evaluation, and again, then trial and error comes in really handy. Alright. So, what you saw me do there is I covered this space. I covered this space with my champion. And then the constraint on covering this entire space is the courage bar, right? That's the constraint. So, it starts dropping courage somewhere, so I gotta make sure that I am as efficient as possible until this point. And then I need to make sure I kill it before it drops courage to 0 once I leave this little zone. So, those are the concepts. And then what happens is, how do I cover this space? Well, you have to understand the blue buff enters a few different states. So it first of all, it does nothing, right, at the start. When it's not aggroed, it can do some other things like walk back to the camp. That's not really relevant, right? Then comes the auto attack channel. Then comes launching the auto attack. And then comes moving. And then the fourth one is standing still, recharging the auto attack. Right? Regenerating the auto attack. So, those are a couple of different states, and we want to behave differently for each of them. Right? So that's what we're going to focus on in the next one. This is just a bit of knowledge and setup to start working through every single concept there is. And then in the session we can go over it and see how we can implement that in your own clear. So let's see in part 2 of camp clearing mechanics.